Hey, what is up, everybody? Jeremy here. And guys, I'm very excited for today's conversation because we're going to cover a lot of great topics, including handling burnout, reaching your physical peak, and, really just enjoying life a lot more. Our guest today is Suzanne Monroe, and she is the founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals, and she is also the director of their Holistic Wellness Certification Program. Suzanne, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Hey, Jeremy. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to connect with you and your audience.
Absolutely. It's kind of weird because I know you probably saw that I stumbled a little bit in that intro. I've been wearing these, I'm not wearing them now, but these clear braces. And when you have them in, you have to learn to talk slightly differently so you don't lisp. And now I'm talking weird without them in. So I guess it's kind of a weird thing.
That's hilarious. All the things we have to adapt to.
Oh, especially when I'm on video. I had these really bad, crooked teeth, and now I don't. So it's been a good thing. But Suzanne, I'm really interested to dive into your story because I think the thing that I find really interesting and the stories I find most impactful are, people that reach a situation in their own life, solve that situation, and they're like, I want to help other people with this. And this is a big thing you saw as well as, you were experiencing burnout in your life. You were trying to find something more. So tell us, a little bit of your story.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And, as I think about career burnout in my story, I really kind of go back to when I was a little girl. I was always thinking about, okay, what do I want to be when I grow up? And of course, every kid thinks a little bit about that. People ask them that question. But I think I was literally obsessed with that question because I spent years really thinking about this. And it may partially have been because I didn't have the answer. So I'm probably thinking, okay, what's wrong with me? I don't know,
By the way, nothing's wrong with you. I went through undergrad, I went through grad school, I went through all these things thinking this is just what you do and not really realizing what I wanted to do. So nothing's wrong with you.
Right. And I think that's the thing. It's what do we want to be when we grow up? And we have that opportunity even when we are grown up to start reevaluating it and thinking about it. But, I watched my parents who, of course, in that generation, you got into one career and you stayed in that job pretty much for a lifetime.
Yep.
And I think while both my parents enjoyed their careers, I don't think they really enjoyed their jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see them enjoying what they were doing. It seemed a little bit of a struggle. They didn't seem very happy. They seemed kind of stressed out, but there was no discussion of ever changing things.
Sure.
So I think that's where I really got some of those questions going, what's the purpose of life, and what are we meant to do? Can we enjoy what we're doing? Yet at the same time, there was a formula that I was taught, which was you go to school, you get good grades, you go to good college, and then you get a good job, and you just follow this formula. And so that's what I did because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I went that path. And of course, here I am, I get in my first job. I'm working for this high, fast-paced consulting firm. And in the first couple of weeks, I'm there and I'm noticing my coworkers are sleeping under their desks.
Oh my gosh.
Right? That was the company culture. Yeah. That little cubby space underneath the desk? Yeah. People would sleep under there. And I'm thinking, is this normal? Right? Because I don't know. It's my first job in the corporate world. But then I'm starting to realize, okay, this is the company culture. I once saw my boss wearing his pajama pants, and I got to work really early. He's wearing his pajama pants. He's off to the bathroom to brush his teeth. And I'm like, okay, this is embarrassing, but it was also concerning.
That's wild because it kind of makes you look at it and you go okay, so if that's my boss is hopefully who I hope to be in several years. Is this the life I have in store for me? That's kind of wild.
It was, and this was just kind of how it was. And so, I was traveling internationally for this company, and I ended up being on this project where I was in Argentina, and, you had to fly on the weekends to get to your project. So, you didn't have weekends and your weeks were pretty busy. You get to the project and the expectation was that you would stay up all night and work on the project and then deliver it to the client the next day. So here we are, it's 2 a.m. We're all in a conference room and I'm falling asleep at my computer. And ultimately I just get up and leave and say, I can't do this. And I know I'm thinking the team is wondering, well, okay, this person can't pull her weight. And, but I couldn't do anymore. It was 2 a.m. and I had, been there for quite a while. But that was a defining moment because I was already on the way to burnout. And I was like, this isn't going to change. So ultimately, I left that position. I switched jobs. But what I found was there were still cultures and still things like that happening in my career. And so I had to start looking at myself, right? Because at first I was in blame. I was like, okay, it's the company's fault. It's the culture's fault. It's my boss's fault. Whoever's fault it is, it really didn't matter. It really came down to what was I going to do about it? Because bottom line, no one was coming to save me. And so I had a real reevaluation moment, and I think we all have these reevaluation moments, kind of these light bulb moments where we have to stop and say, okay, what's really important to us? What do we really want to do here? And for me, I had a reevaluation moment because at the same time that I was experiencing career burnout, my husband at the time was diagnosed with an incurable illness.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, it was kind of crazy. And we just went to the doctor. We find this out. And basically the story was, life is going downhill from here. There's not much you can do about it. Here's a brochure and some information. Here's a pill that you can maybe try, but it probably won't work. And things are just not going to be looking good from here. Because we didn't have a solution, we went a different route and we said, okay, we've got to do something about this. And I kind of became the researcher and really looking into, okay, what can I do to change this? And what happened was, and now it's, 20 some years later and everything they said that would happen to him didn't happen. He's doing great. But what that really was for me was a reevaluation moment to say, okay, here's someone saying, here's the traditional route. In this case, it was with his health. And there was another way. And I said, how do I apply this to my career? Because again, I can follow that formula of go get the good grades, get a good school, go to a good school and then get a good job and stay in that good job. Or I can do something different. And that's really when I decided, hey, I'm going to make a change.
It's so interesting, Suzanne, because I feel like, our journeys are so different, but so the same as well. Like, I know for me, like, I was teaching high school. I was absolutely miserable. And my mom had a stroke in 2012, and it made me look at a lot of what I'm doing. And I'm like, do I want to do this forever? And I didn't know what it was. I tried different careers. I tried to, just go through and do different things. And I started a podcast to really just answer my own questions. And that actually became what, led me to this career. And I think it's really interesting when we can kind of be in that place because you don't have to know where you're going to go. And I think that's the confusion to people. But you do have to know that there's something different for you. And I think it's really, really important to realize that because I think it's, when people look at that and they're like, I've worked all my life for this. This is where I am. What do I do? And I guess for somebody hearing that, if they're in that moment considering moving on to doing something else, like what would you tell them?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, again, you're in that moment. Like in your example, your mom had the stroke, right? It was that reevaluation moment. I had my reevaluation moment. I think so many people have these reevaluation moments. And we have a saying in our community, which is life is happening for you, not to you.
Yes.
So if you can take that opportunity to, instead of just kind of muscling through it, but instead pause and reflect and say, okay, what's the greater opportunity here? And also I like to say, can you find calm in the crisis? Can you kind of step back, kind of take this bird's eye view of your situation and say, okay, what are my options here? Versus I know so many people just feel so stuck, right? And they live stuck for years and they never take that moment to step back and look for the opportunity. And then life just keeps going on, right? So I think we have to use those reevaluation moments. And I'll say this, I feel like over the last few years, we've had like this global reevaluation moment, right?
Yeah.
It's been really huge. Everyone's like, wait, what am I meant to be doing? Millions of Americans are leaving their job. Of course, the Great Resignation. I think it was like 4.5 million people left in just March alone. And burnout is really behind that, right? And then, of course, the pandemic is the big reevaluation moment. So it's an opportunity for people to pause and say, okay, where's the calm in the crisis and what are my options?
So let me ask you this then, because, to hear that story and to know you now and see you now, you're living a very different life. You seems like you're really living in what your purpose is. And I guess for you then, like, how did you discover that? Like, how did you discover like what you wanted to do? Was it aligned because you're like, hey, I was able to help my husband, or was it aligned because of your interests, or how did you explore that?
I love that. And, as I think about, okay, how do you find your soul's work, right? It really does. It comes down to alignment. Now today I kind of reflect back and I think it's like a 3-step formula. At the time I didn't really know it.
Sure.
But it's your natural talents plus your passion plus your personal story. So your natural talents are, okay, what comes easily to me? What am I really good at? These are the things that people just tell you, hey, you're so good at this. You're so good at, connecting with people or speaking with people, right? Or writing or whatever it is. And then there's your passion. And that's, okay, what can I just spend hours doing? And all this time goes by and I think, okay, what just happened here, right? What are you really passionate about? It could be anything. And then the tie-in piece here is your story, because it creates the greater meaning where you match up your talents with your passion. And so for me, my natural talents, this is kind of weird, but I love creating systems out of information.
Oh, my wife does that. I'm terrible at that. My wife is absolutely amazing with that.
Oh, good. I thought I was the only person who liked to do that.
No. She'll like do, put it all together and I'll be like, that's great. I can run it now. But I couldn't envision it like that. So I can appreciate that.
Yeah, so that's kind of my natural talent. I mean, I have others. We won't get into them, okay? And then my passion, of course, was holistic wellness, going back to what you said, what happened in my life with my husband at the time, right? That just became such a passion of mine. I just went headfirst into it. And because we saw such success, of course, it was something that was really meaningful. And my story was, as I applied that to career burnout and wanting to find meaning in my life and carving my own path, it really became about breaking the rules that I was taught, not following that formula. So the funny thing is when I combine those three things, right, the natural talents, the passion, and the story, it leads me to where I am today as the founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals, where basically we support people to create careers as holistic wellness coaches, but using our proven systems. So I tied it all together, and you could have never have told me years ago that this is what I would be doing today. So it's interesting when you follow those three things and how it really can lead to what you're meant to do.
You know what's interesting as well, and this is something I find myself talking about more and more, is the concept of following your passion versus finding your passion. Because if you look at it, it's following your passion is an effect point, right? Like it's something that's happening to you. Like you're following this thing and you're hoping it works out. Whereas finding your passion is causative, right? It's something you're doing. You're actively working towards it. And it kind of aligns with what you're talking about here. Is like you're able to do something, you're working towards something, but at the same time, like your passion should produce something as well, so you can keep doing it. And I guess what would you say to people that are like, well, I'm really passionate about this thing, but I don't know how I'm gonna make money with it in this case? Because in order to keep doing it, you need to make money, right?
I think that's a great question. And I really have to say, and I say this is like my answer to a lot of things, but I think it applies here.
Yeah.
It's about being willing to be on the journey and taking small steps. So when I first started figuring out my passion, of course, I didn't have the whole vision. I didn't have the whole picture. And sometimes people will say, well, if I don't see the whole picture, I'm not moving forward.
Sure.
But I was working in my corporate job where I was burned out, and I started my passion on the side. I was basically moonlighting in the evening. I was starting to work with clients. I was starting to take those small steps forward, because when we do that, yeah, maybe you found your passion, but you're also following it. You're taking action. It's kind of a balance between the two things, right? And that starts to inform what's next. And those small steps are super important because they boost our confidence. They give us that little bit of experience. And then they start opening the window to all the possibilities. But if you don't do the small steps, oftentimes you're going to stay stuck. You're going to stay frozen.
I'm curious as well, Suzanne, because and you may totally disagree with me on this, but I'm just interested to find your viewpoint on it as well, because I've tried it both ways. I've tried just jumping off and starting something, and I've tried starting something alongside what I do, and then you kind of have a decision once the second thing gets more successful of like, do I move on or whatnot? And you're helping people, as you said, with a proven system to become holistic health coaches. And I guess for somebody listening, does it make more sense to just jump off and jump into it, or does it make more sense to start this alongside what you're already doing, and then you get to a point where you have to make a decision?
I see people in my community doing both, right? And
Okay.
I think some of it depends on your personality and how you feel about risk. So when I was growing up, one of the things that was kind of an adage that my family used to say was, you never risk a lot for a little.
Mm-hmm.
Now, unfortunately, that led me to staying in a job and staying stuck for many years, because leaving that job would be a risk,
Sure.
right? With that being said, I'm kind of risk averse. So I need to take those small steps to, again, boost my confidence, kind of start showing me the path. Other people prefer to just go cold turkey and jump right in. And there is a little bit more risk there, but if you can be tolerant of that and maybe you have the resources to do it, then that might be more your style. So I think it's a little bit of a balance. It reminds me of a coach in our community, Natalia Edelman. She was so burned out in her career. I think she was in finance in the corporate world, and just she was starting to get symptoms in her body. She had low energy. Things were just really affecting her. And she really hit that burnout moment. So she went to her boss and she said, "Okay, I need 6 months off." Okay, it's either that or I'm leaving.
I'm sure they didn't agree to that.
Yeah, they actually did.
Wow.
She was such a valued employee. Now,
Okay.
I'm not suggesting this will work for everyone.
Sure.
But she gave herself permission to give herself this time to explore. Now, whether she was working part-time or she was still supporting or whatever, but it wasn't like an end-all be-all. It was like a specific time frame, okay, where she dove into exploring some other things and also getting her health back on track, so that whether she was going to go back or she was going to go in a different direction. So I think we tend to look at things as like one way or the other, but if we can find that middle ground for us, I think that could be really helpful, and everybody's situation is unique.
I'm curious as well, Suzanne, because it's like, I think when you look at corporate culture, right, like one of the difficult things is you're putting the company in front of yourself, you're putting the company's needs in front of yourself. So a lot of times you're letting your health suffer, you're letting your family suffer, you're letting these things slip. And I think people struggle with, at some point putting themselves first, because once you actually put yourself first, you can help other people, right? But if you're not doing so hot, you can't really help others. And I guess for people that have trouble kind of getting through that thought process, like what do you tell them on that?
Putting themselves first, you mean?
Yeah, it can be really hard because we're told all of our lives, like, handle this, handle that, handle whatever. But at the same time, like if you're not doing well, you can't show up in the way you need to show up for others.
Yeah. I think that's really important. It kind of reminds me of also right now of all the people that they surveyed who were, leaving their jobs during this recent time. I think it was 89% of them said it was because of burnout and being unsupported in the workplace, right? So on one level, we're giving all to our jobs, all to our careers, doing our best, yet we don't feel that reciprocity. We don't feel that support. And we have to remember it's kind of a two-way street. Why are we like giving it all the time? And it reminds me again of another story of someone in our community, Kim Goltum, who was exactly like what you said. She said she had performance addiction. Not only was she doing this in the workplace where she was just the highest achiever, but then even after work, she never said no to anything. She was just, yes, yes, yes. And one day she woke up and she couldn't get out of bed.
Wow.
She literally couldn't move, and she went to a bunch of doctors. She couldn't figure it out, but ultimately she figured out she had adrenal fatigue, which is a real illness connected to burnout, basically.
I've suffered from adrenal fatigue. When I was a high school teacher, I thought 9 periods a day meant I must drink 9 large cups of coffee a day. So you can imagine how I was doing.
Okay. And I've been there as well, right? So that's like a real symptom that you're headed on the wrong path. So kind of back to your question, it's like, okay, what do we do about this?
Sure.
It's like, okay, we have to start looking for the signs earlier. And I think a lot of it is realizing the difference between stress and burnout. Everybody has stress. Stress is normal. There's nothing wrong with stress. But let's say you have a bad day, right? And then you're like, okay, I had a bad day, and now the day's over, and tomorrow I go on to the next day and all's well. What people don't realize is that stress, if you don't do something to care for it, it doesn't just go away. It actually kind of gets buried in the body. And what happens is stress starts to build these little moments day after day, right? And that's what ultimately leads to the burnout. So we have to take care of ourselves on this journey. Even if we're givers, we're helpers, we want to be it all, we want to do it all, we have to also give to ourselves in the process. Ultimately, because it's not going to work out for us otherwise. So if we truly believe that we want to give and be of service and provide value to people, we can only do it from this full tank, right? And so we have to see that balance. Otherwise, it's not going to work out in the long term.
Well, I guess looking at Suzanne then versus Suzanne now, like if you could tell your younger self, one thing about this journey you've been through, what's that thing you would tell yourself?
Oh, wow. That's such a good question.
It doesn't even have to be a piece of advice, just something you would tell yourself.
Well, I look back at the times when I was struggling the most, especially when I was in the career burnout situation. And at the time, I'm sitting here in these jobs thinking, why am I in these jobs? I don't like this at all. I feel so stuck. I feel so unhappy, but I see no way out. And if I would have realized at the time that, again, this is happening for me, not to me, but there's a purpose here. I look back, for example, I was working in the pharmaceutical industry for several years, which is completely opposite of the holistic wellness field that I'm in now.
Yeah. So as a very holistic family, I totally get that.
Okay. And so I was not aligned with that even at the time. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do this job, but I don't agree with it. It's not a good fit for me. Right. So I carried this weight, which actually kept me staying stuck longer versus if I would have thought, hey, maybe this is part of the journey. And actually it turned out it was part of the journey. Had I not had that experience, I may not have ended up way over here in this other field because I had an opportunity to see so many things that were happening kind of on the inside of healthcare and traditional healthcare at the time, which really led to an awakening moment for me. So oftentimes the things that are really tough for us, are really hard for us, we keep resisting them rather than saying, okay, what is here for me to learn from?
That's really important.
So I think that's what I would have told myself.
It's really important too, though, because I think if you look at it, right, like, your own, I don't know if morals is the right word, but your own, like, things that you stand for should also align with what you're doing. Like, you know what I mean? And I think that's really tough for people is, they can look at their life and they say, well, I believe this, but I'm doing this. And that could be, health-wise, that can be a really difficult position to put yourself in.
Yeah, I think you bring up such a good point. One thing that has helped me out, and this is years later, again, I think I wish I would have known this then kind of scenario, but if you can get really clear on what I call your personal principles, this can help you make so many decisions, of course, related to your career, but related to your health, related to relationships, really every area of your life. And your personal principles are basically just the things that you deeply care about. And we might know what they are, but if we don't really think about them, we don't make choices from those places. So for example, a couple of my personal principles are wellness, obviously, family, my son and my husband are just everything to me. And then one of my other personal principles is sovereignty. What's sovereignty? Well, you think of like kings and queens, they call themselves sovereigns, right? They have this personal freedom. Well, it's really about self-sovereignty. And self-sovereignty to me is being able to listen to your own truth and take action from there. And this is super important, especially with all the different voices that are out there today, right? Social media or, family, friends, or our past, whatever it is. If we can come back to our inner truth, to me, that's what sovereignty is about. Now, so the point here is that I've got my personal principles, right? So now when I want to go out and do something, I say, does it align with my principles? And this is super helpful for people who are really like overgivers, overachievers, because you feel really guilty about something too. Like, oh, I want to go do this, but I feel bad because I'm not going to be at home with my kids or whatever it is, right? But wait a minute, does it align with one of your personal principles? If yes, the answer is a yes. So it can help us to make these more empowered choices.
That's a really, really important thing to take a look at, because I think so many people sacrifice those personal principles, to make money each and every day. And I think the thing you have to look at is the more often you sacrifice them, the easier it gets. And the less you become, the person you want to be by those principles. And at a certain point, it gets very difficult to turn that back around.
Absolutely, it does. And, I think a lot of us are running around with these narratives in our head about who we're supposed to be or, what our beliefs are. For example, you might have the narrative that I have to work hard to make money, or I have to be the responsible one as it relates to your career, right? Mine was money doesn't grow on trees, right? That was one of them.
My dad always said that.
Yeah. And of course, that never risk a lot for a little. So those two were like the perfect storm for staying stuck in a career. So you have these narratives. We all have these narratives, right? And oftentimes they're just like old conditioning and beliefs. And the thing is, we can change our stories by changing our narratives. We have to create new narratives. What do we want our narratives to be? What do we want our lives to be? And if we come back to our personal principles, that can help us to write those new narratives and those new stories. And you know what? It's super important because I think you probably have heard this, but we spend 90,000 hours in our jobs over a lifetime, which is absolutely insane, right?
That puts it into a crazy perspective I've never thought of. Wow.
Right? Okay, so now if your work is not tied to your personal principles, that's a lot of wasted time.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's super important to get clear on the principles, but also start writing those new narratives. And that might sound kind of cliche, like, okay, write my new narrative. But when you really sit down to do it and try to get clear, what you're going to find is you're probably not going to believe the new narrative that you want. You're probably like, well, that sounds great. Like, oh, I can follow my purpose in life, but I don't really believe that. Then the next step is to look closer at why you don't believe that. what's really underneath all that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get to that, usually you kind of find the gold. You're like, oh, I see, that's just an old pattern, and I actually could make a different choice here. And then that's really what it comes down to. As you start to try these new narratives, you start making new choices in life, and you have new behaviors, and ultimately that does write a new story for you.
I think it's so important to look at it that way, because I even found for myself, like when you're working in what you really want to do, and really working in, what you feel passionate about, what aligns with your purpose, those lines between, what is work and what is play and what is family and what everything else, they really get blurred, and it's like a fuller life. Like, for thankfully, because speaking engagements are going on again, which is something I love to do, and a lot of times, like, when they bring me in to speak, they'll pay for my family to come, and they pay for, my kids to go out and eat and whatever. And it's really cool because it's a fuller life, right? And these are things that if you're stuck in a corporate environment and stuck in so many things where you don't have a choice, it's not available to you. So for people listening to this, Suzanne, they're really getting what you're saying. They're feeling burnt out. They want to do something more. And I know that's something you're really helping people with, to really kind of take control of their life, of their income, and to become a coach and help people with their own health. So for people listening to this, how do you help them?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm happy to talk a little bit about coaching. What I'll say is that most people who end up going on this path to become a coach, they are on what I call the live well, dream big journey. Something's happened to them in their life, kind of like what happened to you, like what happened to me, like what happened to Natalia, what happened to Kim, and something has been a reevaluation moment in their life, and they decided to use that moment to say, hey, what am I going to do next, right? And oftentimes it was a health crisis, whether it was happening to them or a close friend or family member, right? And then they saw a huge change and a transformation, and they said, okay, not only has this been amazing for me, but I want to share it with other people. And that's kind of the dream big side of the equation. I want to go out there, I want to make an impact, and I want to share it with people. And that's really what the opportunity is with coaching. I mean, I got to tell you this here. I mean, this is hilarious. When I first got started in coaching almost 20 years ago now, people didn't really know, what a coach was. And so they thought I was like an athletic coach. And if you know me, like that is nothing further from the truth. Like I love exercise and fitness, but I have absolutely no athletic coordination whatsoever. Okay. And so I'd be like, no, not a sports coach. No. And so I really had to explain to people and educate people on what it meant, right, to be a wellness coach, which is what I was at the time. Things have changed dramatically over the last couple of decades. Everybody pretty much knows what a coach is. There's life coaches, there's health and wellness coaches, there are career coaches, all different types of coaches out there today. And people are much more open to being supported by coaches. So the field is absolutely booming. So many amazing changes. And especially even over the last couple of years, people are looking for support, right? So the cool thing about coaching, Jeremy, is like, you can go back to that formula of like, what are my talents, what are my passion, and what's my story? Mm-hmm. And you can basically carve your own path and create your own career within there based on what you're interested in, based on what you're passionate about, because there's so many subsets of coaching. So you can tell I just love coaching, but
Well, I think it's also a really important aspect as well, because that accountability is vital and that guidance is vital, and you can really help people make a lot of big change in your own life, and that can be just such a rewarding thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that coaching is the most powerful career on the planet, and the reason I say that is because there's sort of this mirror effect. So oftentimes, whatever we're coaching or teaching people about is something that we're also simultaneously on the journey with.
Yep.
So, for example, when I first started as a coach, I was helping people with sugar cravings, because sugar cravings was something I had and I had been working on and I had developed some tools with. But it doesn't mean that I was completely like free of sugar cravings. And that's what's really cool. You don't have to be perfect to be a coach, right? And so you could just share this journey. And then the mirror piece is that oftentimes your clients are working on something that, oh, this applies to me too. So there's this shared sort of dual journey. And that's why it's so powerful, I think.
Well, Suzanne, I've really enjoyed this conversation. We went in a lot of really cool directions. For people listening, how can they connect with you? How can they find out more about how you're helping them?
Well, thanks. This has been such a fun conversation. I know we could talk for hours about career burnout and finding your passion and everything, but a great next step for people is to go to superpowergift.com. This is where they can take a quiz to discover their career superpower. So knowing your career superpower, it's just a great place to start to end your career burnout, first of all. But it's also going to help you to really tap into your talents. You know, we all have these unique talents that we may or may not be using. And if we're not using them, it can often lead to career burnout. So go ahead, go over there to superpowergift.com, and then you can take the quiz and you'll get your customized profile, and it's going to include tips on basically how to use your career superpower, not only in your career, but in your relationships, in your health and wellness, and really in every area of your life. And that's a great next step for people to stay connected.
Very cool. Well, Suzanne Monroe, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks, Jeremy. This has been so fun, and thanks for everybody for listening in.